I woke up at 6:10 in the morning, like most days, when a little darkness still clung to the windows. The winter cold in Denver always surprises me, even after all these years. I turned on the coffee pot and waited for the smell of strong coffee to fill the kitchen. While I drank the first sips, I looked over the repair order on the table. An old machine a neighbor had asked me to look at. Nothing urgent, just something to keep me busy. Earn a few extra dollars since my back stopped me from working like I used to. My phone vibrated. It was Emily. "Get ready, we'll pick you up in 30 minutes. I read the message twice. It didn't say why or where we were going, but I got up from the chair without thinking. Emily almost never asked me for anything. So I hurried to change, combed my hair as best I could, and put on my favorite shirt, even if the sleeves were a little worn. By 6:40, I was standing on the porch, the freezing air hitting my face. The sun was just starting to light up the neighborhood. A thin layer of frost covered the wooden fence. I put my hands in my pockets for warmth, waiting for the sound of an engine. At 6:45, Brian's gray SUV pulled up. As usual, he didn't roll down the window to say hello. He just gave a short nod, almost like it bothered him to stop. I got into the back seat and closed the door slowly. "Where are we going?" I asked. Emily in the passenger seat answered without looking at me. "A doctor's appointment, Dad. Nothing serious." I couldn't help but notice her tense voice, like she was repeating something rehearsed. Brian, though, had a hard expression, focused on the road, his jaw tight. He sped up more than usual as soon as we hit the highway. For several minutes, the only sound was the SUV's engine and the wind hitting the windows. Brian kept looking in the rearview mirror, like I was a burden sitting back there. I started to feel a knot in my stomach when I saw us take the exit toward the edge of the city. "Emily, this isn't the way downtown," I said, trying to stay calm. She looked down at her hands, gripping the seatbelt tightly. It was Brian who answered, his tone blunt. "We're going where you should have gone a long time ago." My heart jumped. Just then, a large green sign appeared in front of us. Impossible to ignore. Green Hills Senior Living, 5,000. I felt like someone had dumped a bucket of ice water over me. What is this?" I muttered. Emily's eyes were glassy, but she said nothing. Brian added, without flinching, "You can't live alone forever. We're making a responsible decision." That's when I lost what little calm I had left. "Stop the car," I said. Brian didn't answer. He just kept driving, even sped up a little. The engine's roar drilled into my head. I repeated, "Louder. I told you to stop the car." This time Brian let out a short, mocking laugh. Emily tried to intervene. "Brian, please, that's enough." But he cut her off with a look that chilled my blood. "I know what's best." The air inside the vehicle became unbearable. I felt my breath get heavy, helplessness climbing up my throat. I hit the back of the seat lightly. "Stop the damn car." And then, without warning, Brian slammed on the brakes. The SUV stopped hard on the shoulder of a nearly deserted stretch of highway. The jolt threw me forward. I barely had time to grab the seat. Brian hit the door locks and opened my door from his control. If I hadn't grabbed on, the door would have hit me. "You want to get out?" he asked, with that cold smile I never liked. "Fine, but not here," I said, feeling the icy wind already rushing into the car. Brian didn't listen. He leaned back, opened the door even wider, and practically forced me to get out. Emily burst into tears. "Dad! No, don't go, Dad!" She tried to unbuckle her seatbelt, but Brian grabbed her arm, stopping her. I got out of the car, unable to believe what was happening. I didn't even have time to close the door before Brian said, "Get back on your own if you think you can take care of yourself." And just like that, he slammed the door shut. The SUV sped off, kicking up dust, leaving me standing there like I was a stranger, not his wife's father. The wind was so cold my cheeks burned. I was only wearing a shirt, no coat. I'd left in a hurry. I checked my pockets. I didn't have my wallet or my spare keys. I remembered leaving them on the kitchen counter. I pulled out my phone, 2% battery. The signal bars rose and fell, like they were playing a game. I looked up. To my right, an abandoned warehouse with broken windows. In the distance, a rusted sign announced a gas station, but it had to be a mile or more away. The road looked endless. A semi-truck sped past. Its horn startled me so much I had to step back from the edge of the road. I felt the blast of wind kick up dirt, filling my face and eyes with dust. I didn't know what to do, so I started to walk. Very slowly. My right leg ached from the old herniated disc. Every step was rougher than the last. The wind blew leaves and trash against my tired feet. I tried to turn on the phone again, but before I could even dial Emily's number, the screen went dark for good. And there I was, in the middle of nowhere, hands numb, chest tight, and one question drilling into my mind. How could my own family leave me like this? I stood there for a moment, in the same spot where the dust from the SUV still hung in the air, like the ground itself didn't want to accept what just happened. I took a deep breath, but the cold air burned my lungs. At that time of morning in the middle of February, the wind comes straight down from the mountains. You feel it in your bones, especially when you're past 60. I stumbled a few feet to the shadow of a huge rusted metal sign. I don't know how many minutes I stayed there, leaning on one of the posts, trying to get my legs to stop shaking. The pain in my back started to throb, like a needle someone was pushing in slowly. I rubbed my hands, but they were already too cold to get warm. Headlights appeared in the distance. A vehicle was getting closer. It was an old pickup, white paint peeling. The driver slowed down when he saw me. He stopped about 20 yards away, close enough to watch me through the windshield. I raised my hand, not asking for help, just showing I wasn't a threat. But after a few seconds, the man looked away and accelerated again. The engine roared, and in an instant, the truck was gone around the bend. I just stared at the empty road, feeling even more alone than before. I don't know why that gesture hurt so much. Maybe because it was a mirror of what had just happened. Someone seeing me and choosing to drive away. To my left, from an empty lot full of old cans and torn bags, a skinny dog came out. It took a few steps and barked, suspicious. It was dirty, ribs showing. Just like mine when I was a kid in Mexico and times were tough. I held out my hand to show I wouldn't hurt it. But the dog backed up, growled a little, and after sniffing the air, it turned and ran into the bushes. "Even you're avoiding me," I muttered, not sure if I should laugh or cry. The wind blew harder, kicking up dry leaves and dust that got in my eyes. I covered my face with my forearm. The shirt I was wearing, long-sleeved but thin, did nothing to block the cold. I could feel my fingers stiffening from the lack of circulation. I kept walking slowly, dragging my right foot a little. Every so often I had to stop to catch my breath. The cold, the stress, the lack of air, everything was conspiring to take me down. A piece of a plastic bag blew by and wrapped around my calf. I tried to kick it off, but the wind just stuck it back onto me. I ripped it off in disgust and threw it. I moved forward a few more yards, and then I heard the sound of a soft engine behind me. I turned. A white SUV was approaching very slowly. I don't know why, but I felt a mix of fear and relief. The vehicle stopped a few feet away, and the passenger window started to roll down. The icy breeze rushed in. A woman wearing a dark blue coat, her hair in a perfect bun, looked out. She had sharp features, a firm gaze, but there was something warm in her eyes. "Are you all right?" she asked, leaning a little to see me better. "I've seen you walking for a while now." I stuttered. I didn't expect anyone to stop. "I'm just trying to get back to the city," I said, even though I knew I was getting farther from that goal every minute. She frowned, studying me from a distance, like someone recognizing a problem before the other person admits it. The driver's door opened. A tall man, maybe in his 40s, got out. He had the posture of a retired military man. Straight back, precise movements. His hand rested near his belt, not aggressively, but like a trained reflex. "I'm David," he said. "Do you need medical assistance?" I shook my head. "I'm just a little disoriented." The woman got out of the vehicle too. Her boots hit the pavement decisively. She walked toward me, not rushing, but with confidence. "I'm E.G. Chambers," she introduced herself. "And you, clearly, are shaking." She looked around, as if assessing the situation. The empty road, the vacant lot, my light clothing. Then she looked back at me, this time with a more serious expression. "Your phone?" she asked. I pulled the device from my pocket. The black screen was still blank. I held it up slightly for her to see. "No battery," I muttered. "And your wallet?" "At home," I answered, feeling shame rise in my throat. I left without thinking. She exchanged a quick look with David. A look that said more than I could understand right then. "I'm taking you to the nearest gas station," she offered. like a decision already made. Really, I don't want to cause any trouble, I tried to say. She cut me off, without losing her calm. You cannot keep walking in this weather. You're going to get sick. David was already opening the back door of the white SUV. Get in, please, he added. I stood there for a few seconds, fighting with pride and need, but finally I gave in. There was no other real option. I took one step, then another, and got into the vehicle. The interior was immaculate. Light leather seats, a soft smell of cedar wood, and a small blanket folded in the corner. I settled in slowly. David closed the door carefully, as if afraid to hurt me with even the slightest slam. She got in the front, turned a little, and gave me a polite smile. What's your name? Tom, I replied. She nodded. All right, Tom, let's get you somewhere safe first. Then we'll see what else you need. The way she said it gave me a strange feeling of relief and distrust at the same time. David started the engine slowly, and the vehicle got back on the road. For a few moments, nobody spoke. The silence was only broken by the soft sound of warm air coming from the vents, which was finally starting to bring feeling back to my fingers. Then she turned her head slightly toward me. The gray SUV that left you. Was that your son-in-law driving? I tensed up automatically. How? How do you know that? David answered before she could. We saw it pulled over a few miles back. I recognized the model and the license plate. I was speechless. I didn't know if this was a coincidence or a sign. She didn't take her eyes off me as she said, We heard part of the argument when the vehicle stopped. Tom, what happened exactly? I tried to look out the window, but she waited. Patient, almost motherly. It's nothing, I replied. Just family problems. David kept driving, and after a few minutes we passed an area with a concrete divider in the middle of the road. There, on a high pole, I saw a traffic camera pointed right toward us. David pointed with his chin. I think that camera recorded everything. I felt my stomach twist into a knot. The idea that there was a recording of my humiliation made me sick. She, however, took it as a good sign. Then we can find out exactly what happened. You don't have to tell us anything until you're ready. First we help you. Then you decide. The firmness in her voice surprised me. There was something about her that didn't allow for argument. I thought they would take me back to my house, but after a few minutes I noticed we took the opposite turn. Where are we going? I asked. She didn't hesitate. To a place where you can get warm, and where we can talk privately. It was then that I saw in the distance a large building with glass windows and a bright blue sign. Chambers Medical Supply, Corporate Office. My hands clenched on my knees. When we arrived, a uniformed guard opened the gate and greeted her by name. Not like she was an important visitor, but like she owned the place. I got out of the vehicle with difficulty. The hot air from the engine still clung to my feet. I looked at her, adjusting her coat with elegance and seriousness. And there, standing in front of that enormous building, with my hands still shaking from the cold and the fear, I understood something. This woman had not shown up by chance, and my life, from that moment on, was not going to follow the same path. Entering the building, I immediately felt a strange contrast. A few minutes ago, I was stranded on the highway, shaking like a lost old man, and now I was walking through a bright lobby, polished floors and high ceilings. Like I belonged to another world, the automatic doors opened without a sound, releasing a warm air that hit me with a relief so strong it almost made me close my eyes. Two receptionists stood up when they saw her and said in unison, "Good morning, Miss Chambers." I kept walking behind her, a little hunched over, like I didn't want to draw attention. It was impossible, though, to go unnoticed when you entered with someone like her. She had the kind of presence that made everyone look twice. She pointed to a door on the right and spoke with a confidence that almost intimidated me. "Prepare meeting room 3 for Mr. Tom. And please, bring some very hot ginger tea." One of the girls jotted it down quickly, and the other gave me a kind smile. That surprised me. I wasn't used to elegant people speaking to me like I was important. David showed me the way with a respectful gesture. I walked slowly, feeling my dirt-stained boots and worn pants didn't belong in such a clean place. Room 3 was small but cozy, with a brown leather sofa and a perfectly clean glass table. I didn't know if I should sit or wait for instructions, so I just stood there for a second, until David gently touched my shoulder. "Please, sit down. The tea is on its way." I obeyed, sinking a little into the armchair. though my back protested as I leaned back. I had barely settled in when an employee entered with a tray. She brought a hot, carefully folded cloth. "For your hands," she said gently. I just stared at it, not sure what to do. I couldn't remember the last time someone worried about my hands being cold. Finally, I took the cloth and held it against my numb fingers. The heat spread slowly, painful at first, but comforting after. David handed me a small bottle of water. "Are you feeling dizzy?" "Breathe deep," he advised in a low voice. I shook my head, though the truth was, I did feel a bit stunned. Not just from the cold, but from the speed at which everything was happening. She came back in a few seconds later, quietly carrying a thin folder. She placed it on the table in front of me. The title read, "Chambers Medical Supply Emergency Response Plan." I cleared my throat. What do I have to do with this?" She pulled a chair toward me and sat down, never taking her eyes off me. "You have no relation to it at all," she said calmly. "But I want you sitting, warm, and a little calmer before we talk." Then she folded her hands and looked at me intently. Not harshly, but with a sincerity I couldn't interpret. "Tom, can you tell me what happened exactly on that highway?" I looked away, toward the window. I didn't want to talk. I was ashamed. "It's just a misunderstanding," I said, wishing the conversation would end right there. She didn't accept the evasion. "David clearly saw your son-in-law leave you. That is not a misunderstanding." Just then the door opened, and they brought the ginger tea. The steam rose in a small warm cloud, filling the room with the smell of roots and honey. She passed me the cup, and for a moment my hands stopped shaking. She lowered her voice a little. "I know that kind of behavior. All too well. I suffered it too." I looked up. There was a shadow on her face I hadn't seen before. A sadness she tried to hide, but not completely. "I don't like to remember that time," she added, "but I will not stand by while an older man goes through the same thing." My throat tightened. He gets angry. "He's not a bad kid," I said in a small voice, not fully believing my own words. She shook her head slowly. "It's not about being bad. It's about respect. And he did not respect you." I stayed silent, feeling an uncomfortable burning in my chest. I didn't know if it was anger, sadness, or shame. After a moment, she asked cautiously, "Do you want to try calling your daughter?" I had to admit the truth. "The phone is dead." Without hesitating, she opened the door and called an assistant. "Bring him a portable charger, please." When the device finally turned on, the screen showed several messages. "Emily. Dad, are you home yet?" "Emily. Answer me, I'm worried." "Brian. Call me when he's calmed down." She saw Brian's message and pursed her lips. She didn't say anything, but her expression was a mix of annoyance and concern. I picked up the phone to reply, but she raised her hand. "Not now. Not when you are this vulnerable. Breathe first. Rest a moment. Then decide what to say." I stayed there with the phone in my hand, undecided. No one had spoken up for me like that in years. And not in a demanding tone, but a protective one. David appeared at the door again, his expression tense. "There's a man in a gray SUV parked across from the building. He's been there for 5 minutes. Looks like he's watching us." She stood up immediately. "Colorado plate 7DT, right?" David nodded. "Exactly." I felt a jolt in my stomach. "Brian," I blurted out, more a whisper than a statement. She put a hand on my shoulder. Firm, not rough. "Calm down. He's not coming in." Then to David, "Tell security to monitor him." Nothing more. No confrontation. When the door closed, she turned back to me. "Tom, you do not owe him an explanation right now. Not after what he did." I sank deeper into the armchair, emotionally exhausted. The edge of the glass table was cold under my fingers. She changed the subject gently. "How long have you been living alone?" I sighed. 8 years. Since my wife died. "And your family visits often?" "Emily does. When she can. But since she got married, she comes less." She listened intently, without interrupting. Then she said, "I want to invite you to have lunch in the company cafeteria, not out of obligation. I just think you need a hot meal and a moment to regain your strength." I nodded. My stomach had been making noises for a while, but I was too embarrassed to mention it. As we left the room, I saw 2 guards looking at a screen with the image of the gray SUV. I felt a pinch in my chest. a mix of fear and resentment. Brian was out there, waiting. She muttered to David, "If he approaches the entrance, let me know immediately." The cafeteria area was full of employees in uniforms and name badges. Some greeted her with respectful smiles. "Good morning, boss." I barely managed to nod. I felt out of place with my worn clothes and dirty boots. She picked up a tray and started serving me food. Steaming chicken soup, soft bread, apple slices. "Eat, don't worry," she said, placing the tray in front of me. David sat at a nearby table watching the door. I had barely taken 2 spoonfuls when, looking toward the window, I saw him. Brian. Getting out of the SUV, walking with hard steps toward the building's entrance, his face full of contained rage. My heart hammered against my chest. My hands started shaking again. She put her spoon down on the table, her eyes fixed on me, serene but firm. "Tom," she said with a strange calm, "I need you to keep your composure." She held my gaze. "Leave this to me." And even though I had only known her for a few hours, for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could trust someone. From the table where I was sitting, I could see the lobby perfectly through the large glass wall separating the cafeteria. I had the spoon still in my hand when I saw Brian enter. His walk was fast, almost aggressive, like he was pushing the air in front of him. His face was red. I don't know if from the cold or from rage, but I recognized it instantly. That was the face Emily usually tried to calm down with a quick apology. 2 security guards approached him, not threatening, but firm. "Do you have an appointment, sir?" one asked. Brian didn't lower his voice. "I'm here for my father-in-law. He's in this building. I have to take him." The guard looked at the tablet in his hand. "I'm sorry, sir. There's no visit scheduled. We need authorization." Brian gritted his teeth and took a step forward, trying to see past the guard. From my seat, I felt my pulse quicken. It was like the morning's cold was rushing back, freezing me from the inside out. She saw everything from the same table. She stood up before I could open my mouth. "Allow me to speak with him," she said calmly. Then she turned to me. "Tom, please, stay seated. I'll handle this." I tried to protest, to get up with the intention of explaining something to Brian, but my legs didn't obey me, and her firm gaze pinned me to the chair. She adjusted the collar of her coat, smoothed her clothes as if preparing for an important meeting, and walked toward the entrance with a confidence I had rarely seen in my life. David followed close behind, not right next to her, but slightly back, like someone used to anticipating problems without interfering until necessary. I leaned forward a little, watching every move. I could feel the trembling in my hands again, not just from fear, but from shame. It weighed on me, imagining what the employees would think of me. An old man who needs a stranger to defend him from his own son-in-law. She stopped in front of Brian. "You are Brian Carter?" she asked, her voice calm. That calm that doesn't need to be loud to command respect. Brian turned abruptly. "Yeah, and who are you supposed to be?" "I am E.G. Chambers. Mr. Tom is in my care right now." Brian laughed, not a laugh of humor, but a dry laugh of disbelief. "In your care?" "Ma'am, I dropped that man off this morning for an appointment. I turned around for 1 second and he disappeared. I'm here to pick him up." David narrowed his eyes, alert, not missing a detail. "She didn't flinch. He didn't disappear. You left him on the highway." Brian's eyes widened, then darkened with anger. "And how do you know that, huh? What are you implying?" "I am stating a fact," she replied. "You left him alone, with no charged phone, no coat, in below-freezing temperatures. If I hadn't driven by, I don't know what condition we would have found him in." Brian took a step toward her, but the guards also took a half-step forward, enough to make him reconsider. He glanced around and noticed some employees had stopped to watch the altercation. That seemed to bother him more. "He is my father-in-law," he said, raising his voice. "I have the right to talk to him. I have the right to take him." "No," she said, her tone firmer but still controlled. "You have no right to anything if your presence puts his well-being at risk." The words landed like an unexpected blow. I felt my heart pounding in my chest. Brian clenched his fists. "You don't know anything about us. Stay out of it." "I am in it," she said, leaning her face in slightly without changing her posture, "because you abandoned him. That is endangerment. That is abuse. And if you do not leave this building right now, I will have to call the police." Brian looked at her with pure hatred, the kind of hate that makes the veins in the neck stand out. "You! You can't do that, he stammered, but he didn't sound sure. She raised an eyebrow. Try me. A tense silence formed around them. I could see Brian's jaw tensing as he decided what to do. Finally, he let out a sound between a grunt and a snort, turned on his heel, and pushed the door open so hard the glass rattled. Through the window, I watched him get to his SUV, yank the door open, get inside, and take off without any care, squealing his tires on the pavement. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. The sound of silverware and conversations in the cafeteria slowly returned, as if the world had been on pause during the confrontation. She walked back to me with calm steps, but I noticed a slight exhaustion in her eyes, as if the situation had stirred up memories she preferred to keep buried. She sat across from me, folded her hands, and said, "Tom, you have two options." My voice came out quieter than I wanted. "What?" "Options. First," she said, looking at me with direct honesty, "go back to your house right now and face the situation with Brian." I felt my stomach shrink. The idea of going back to a place where he might be waiting, just thinking about it, made my palms sweat, despite the cold. "Second," she continued, "you come with me to the company's retreat complex just outside Denver. It's a quiet place, secure, with staff on duty. You can sleep, eat something decent, and think in peace." I swallowed. "Go. With you?" "Yes," she replied bluntly. "It's nothing strange. It's just for one night. You need a space where no one is pressuring you." I stared at the table, at the half-eaten plate, the steam still rising slowly from the soup. My mind was full of doubts, like a dark room where you don't know what furniture is in front of you. I asked, barely looking at her, "Why are you helping me? You hardly know me." She leaned back slightly in her chair and gave a small smile, tinged with nostalgia. "Because I've seen men like you, good men, hard-working, who give everything for their family, until someone corners them and makes them doubt their own worth." Then she sighed. "And because I've known men like your son-in-law, controlling, manipulative, arrogant, I can't stand it." David appeared just then, looking in through the entrance. "His SUV has left the perimeter," he reported. She nodded and stood up. "Then we can go when you're ready." I looked at my hands, which were still trembling slightly from the shock. I looked at the food I had barely tasted. Then I looked at her. This strange woman who, in a matter of hours, had become the only stable point in the middle of the chaos. I felt something I hadn't felt in many years. Someone was on my side. "Okay," I said finally. "I'll go with you." She gave a small, sincere smile. "Good, let's go." We headed to the lobby. The employees watched us with curiosity, but also with respect. As I passed the reception desk, one of the girls said, "Have a good day, Mr. Whitaker. Take care." I nodded, still surprised to hear my last name in such a fancy place. The automatic doors opened. A cold wind met us, but this time it didn't cut through me like knives. Maybe because of the hot tea, maybe because the decision was made. Or maybe because, for the first time in a long time, I wasn't walking alone. David opened the door of the white SUV and helped me in. She settled into the front seat. As the vehicle pulled away, I felt my life taking a detour I hadn't chosen, but one that maybe I had needed for a long time. Her car left Denver slowly, as if we were leaving behind not just the city, but also the chaos of everything that had happened since dawn. I looked out the window, resting my forehead on the cold glass. In the distance, the Rocky Mountains seemed motionless, covered by a light layer of snow reflecting the orange light of the sunset. The sky was turning a shade between copper and lavender. And for a moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Silence inside me. David drove with a smoothness that almost surprised me, attentive to every curve. Now and then he consulted with her about the route. Both of them worked with a coordination that only comes from years of trust. She, sitting in the front seat, turned her head slightly toward me. "Think of this as a rest, Tom. Just that." I nodded, though my hands were still gripping the seatbelt, as if the simple act of letting go could send me back to the roadside where Brian had left me. The fear was still there, hidden somewhere in my chest, but there was also a small relief trying to break through. We stopped at a small grocery store on the outskirts of Evergreen. The parking lot was almost empty, lit by a single flickering light post. She turned to David. "Buy him a light coat, please, and something warm to drink." I hurried to say, "That's not necessary, really. I don't want to cause more trouble." She looked at me as if the sentence didn't even make sense. Tom, you are wearing a cotton shirt in the middle of winter. It's not trouble. It's common sense. David got out of the car without another word. While we waited, she rested her arms on the back of the seat and asked me, "Do you have family nearby? Friends you could stay with if you need to?" I shook my head, feeling a strange weight in my throat. "Just some old friends, but they live hundreds of miles away. Most of them have their own lives now, or their own problems." She nodded, as if she expected that answer. Sometimes loneliness doesn't come because we choose it, but because other people start choosing for us. I didn't know what to say. Her words hung between us like an uncomfortable echo. David returned with a bag, a dark blue coat, a hot water bottle, some rolls, and a pack of tissues. She passed me the coat and said simply, "Put it on. It's going to be cold tonight." I obeyed. The coat felt soft, warm, and for some reason it made me feel protected, even if just a little. We kept driving on increasingly empty roads. The car's headlights seemed like the only ones on the whole stretch. The trees on the side of the road leaned in like giant shadows, and the silence of the surroundings reminded me how tired I was, how fragile I had become, without even realizing it. Finally, we arrived at a metal gate. A guard came out of his booth and, seeing her, immediately straightened up, nodding his head slightly. "Good evening, Miss Chambers." The gate opened slowly, letting the SUV pass. Behind it, a gravel path stretched out, surrounded by tall pine trees. Between the trees I could see small wooden cabins, each with dim lights in the windows that gave them a cozy look. She pointed to the left. "That one is number 4. It will be yours tonight." David parked right in front of the cabin's porch. When I got out of the car, the cold air hit my face, but it didn't bother me as much as before. Maybe because of the coat, maybe because I wasn't alone anymore. The cabin smelled like clean wood. Inside, everything was simple but warm. A large bed with white sheets, a nightstand, a yellow lamp, a small desk, and an electric fireplace that gave off a faint hum. Everything was tidy with an almost comforting neatness. She turned on the heat and set the thermostat to 72 degrees. "That should be comfortable," she said. David checked the bathroom, the faucet, the windows, even the back door. His movements were precise, professional, like someone who had done this many times before. She left the shopping bag on the table. "If you need anything, anything at all, call me. I'm in cabin number 2. I could barely find the words. "Thank you. I don't know how to thank you for all this." She shook her head with a gentle movement. "You don't have to thank me for anything. Elderly people deserve to be cared for with respect, and you have been through too much in one day." David handed me a phone. "It's not a new cell, but it works. If anything seems strange, call me." When they left, the cabin fell silent. I sat on the bed and let out a long sigh, the kind that seems to come from the bottom of your soul. For the first time since that morning, I no longer felt in immediate danger. I felt safe, even with a sadness still burning inside. I went out onto the porch and looked at the forest. The sky was black now, the stars shining between the high pine branches. I heard crickets and the rustling of leaves in the wind. The smell of damp earth and wood reminded me of camping trips I took with my wife when Emily was little. The phone vibrated in my pocket. A message from Emily. "Where are you?" "I'm so worried, Dad." My heart sank. Before I could answer, another message came through. "Brian says you left just to cause problems. Is that true?" I felt a profound weariness. So much pain in just a few lines. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Just then, there was a soft knock on the door. It was her, holding a tray. "You haven't had dinner," she said. "I brought you something hot." There was soup, soft bread, and a cup of herbal tea that smelled like chamomile and mint. We sat at the small table. I ate slowly, still processing the day. She spoke very little, as if she understood my mind needed silence more than conversation. But she asked me a question now and then to keep me present. "What did you do before the accident? Have you always lived in Denver? What do you grow in your garden?" And little by little I started telling her fragments of my life. The accident at the factory, the hard rehabilitation, the depression that came after, the small pension that wasn't enough, the pride that stopped me from asking for help. She listened without interrupting, with an attention that few people have these days. After dinner she reminded me, "Lock the door securely and leave the porch light on. It's custom here." She said good night and walked toward her cabin. Her silhouette faded among the trees as the yellow light guided her steps. At 9, I got a message from David. No sign of the gray SUV in the vicinity. All is quiet. I got under the covers, my body exhausted. But sleep wouldn't quite come. A sharp noise hit the window, just a branch moved by the wind. Still, I got up to check that everything was okay. I went back to bed. A few minutes later, I heard the distant sound of a motorcycle passing on the nearby highway. It was nothing strange, but my chest tightened again. Around midnight, the phone rang. Unknown number. I hesitated for 5 seconds before answering. "Dad, where are you?" Brian's voice was a tense whisper, almost threatening. I felt a chill go up my spine. I hung up without saying a word. I turned off the light. I lay back down. My heart was still pounding. But in the middle of that growing fear there was another, softer feeling. The feeling so unusual that someone was finally on my side. That first night away from home was the first in many years that I felt treated with dignity. And still, I knew the worst was yet to come. The next morning I woke with a start to a soft knock on the door, like someone didn't want to scare me. I sat up slowly, feeling the stiffness in my back, and opened it. It was David, with his usual composure, holding a tray. "Breakfast, Mr. Tom. Waffles, eggs, and fresh coffee." The smell of the coffee hit me immediately, warm and familiar. "Thank you, son," I muttered, still half asleep. As he set the tray on the table, he added, "Miss Chambers wants to see you at the office at 10. She says it's important." I nodded while I put on the coat they had bought me the day before. In the mirror, for the first time in a long time, I didn't see a discarded old man, but someone a little firmer, a little less defeated. When I went out, she was already waiting for me in the parking lot. She wore a flawless navy blue suit, her hair pulled back elegantly. She looked ready to face the world, as always. "Good morning, Tom," she said with a brief smile. "Did you get any sleep?" "A little." "Enough?" "It'll do," she replied as we got in the car. The drive into the city felt shorter than yesterday. Maybe because this time I could think clearly, or maybe because everything that had happened since Brian left me was still processing inside me, layer by layer. We entered the underground parking garage of Chambers Medical Supply. Several people hurried past with folders and coffee cups, but when they saw her, they greeted her with respect. I still wasn't used to it, walking next to someone who inspired so much order and security. "This way," she said, guiding me to the elevator. We went up to the second floor. When the doors opened, I saw a wide hallway, with photos of old employees and awards on the walls. She walked without rushing, like this was her natural territory. We entered a large meeting room, with windows overlooking Denver. The sunrise was still slipping between the buildings, painting the carpet in golden tones. On the table was a laptop, a pitcher of water, notepads, and 2 thick black binders. David stayed outside, standing, watching the hallway with military attention. She pointed me to the center seat. She sat to my right, closer than last time, as if to make it clear we weren't strangers anymore. "Tom," she began, "I need you to see something." She opened the laptop and projected a photo onto the large screen. It was a gray SUV, the same color, the same shape, the same car. "This was yesterday," she said. "Your son-in-law was watching the building for over 20 minutes. I felt my stomach flip. "How do you know for sure?" I managed to say. She changed the image. This time it was a video. Brian, walking in front of the building's doors, talking on the phone, looking inside with anxiety and anger at the same time. "We enhanced the audio from an employee's phone who walked by," she explained. The screen showed approximate subtitles. "Where is he?" "He can't be in there. Tell me if he comes out." I sat still, gripping the arms of the chair. He was looking for me. "No, Tom," she corrected gently. "He was trying to control the situation." "Control you." She moved to a third image, Brian arguing with the security guard from the day before. His face was distorted with frustration. "This is not an isolated outburst," she said. "It's a pattern." I looked down, as if I was ashamed of my own son-in-law's behavior. She handed me one of the black binders. "Read the title, State Guidelines, Elder Rights and Legal Protection, and what does this have to do with me?" I asked, my voice thin. "Everything," she replied. Seniors have specific rights when it comes to emotional abuse, coercion, or abandonment. You have more power than you think. I still said nothing, just listening. Then she took a breath, as if it was hard for her to enter painful territory. When I was 37, she began, my ex-husband isolated me from my friends. He controlled my bank accounts. He monitored my phone. And every time I tried to ask for help, he told me I was exaggerating. I listened intently. It was the first time she had spoken about herself like this. I didn't see it as abuse, she continued. I told myself he just wanted what was best. Until one day, my father got sick, and he forbade me from visiting him. Her voice cracked a little, but she pushed on. He died before I could be there, and I never forgave myself for that. She was silent for a few seconds, as if reliving it. That's why, she added firmly, when I saw how Brian left you on that highway, I knew exactly what was happening. I couldn't help but feel a burning in my eyes, not just for me, but for her too. She took the second binder. And here, she said, opening it, is a practical manual for preventing financial abuse. Inside were diagrams, steps to take, emergency numbers, examples of common manipulations. Brian is not going to stop, she assured me. She closed the binder with a soft, decisive sound. And I am not going to let you face this alone. I swallowed. Ellie, why are you doing so much for me? We barely know each other. She held my gaze with a sincerity that disarmed me. Because you remind me of my father. He was also treated like he wasn't worth anything, just for getting older. She lowered her voice. I will not let that happen again. The silence that followed was deep, almost intimate. I felt there was an invisible bridge between us, built from wounds we both understood. Then she called David. He entered, holding another phone. The temporary cell phone we gave you has received unwanted messages, he said in a professional tone. I recommend changing it. Messages? I asked, surprised. David showed me the device. 5 new messages. What are you doing? Emily is crying. Answer me, Dad. You can't hide. We need to talk now. I went cold. She closed the door. Tom, we need to know what you want to do. I took a deep breath, feeling an immense weight on my shoulders. She stood up. Before you decide, I want to show you one more thing. We went out into the hallway. We walked past offices, labs, and employees in white coats. Some greeted her with respect. Finally, we reached the internal media studio. There was a huge television anchored to the wall. She picked up a remote and turned on the screen. The video began. It was all there, the gray SUV, the door opening, my body being practically pushed out, the dust kicking up as the car sped away. I watched every second as if it were the first time. Except this time, I wasn't in shock. This time, I was aware, present, and it hurt in a different way. I felt something move inside me. It wasn't rage, it was clarity. She turned off the screen. This happened, Tom. You didn't imagine it. Don't minimize it, she added softly. And you can use this to get your life back. I closed my eyes for a few seconds. I breathed deep. I couldn't say it out loud yet, but inside me something was starting to stand firm. A part of me that had been asleep for years. She took a step back. You don't have to make any decisions today, but I want you to understand something. You are not alone. At that moment, David opened the door again. The truck is ready, Miss Chambers. We can leave when you are. Where? I asked, though I already guessed the answer. She took her coat. To your house. I want to see where you live, and I want to make sure you are safe. I swallowed a mix of fear and relief. I nodded. I didn't know what was waiting for us, but for the first time in years, I felt like someone was walking beside me. The drive to my neighborhood had never felt so long. The car moved through the narrow streets as I watched out the window, my heart shrinking. I felt a strange mix of anxiety and shame, returning to my own house accompanied by 2 people who were, until recently, strangers, and because I could no longer trust that my home was really a safe place. When we turned onto my street, the first thing I saw was the mailbox, tilted to one side, like it had been hit. It wasn't like that the last time I saw it. The sound of my breathing became more irregular. That wasn't like that yesterday, I muttered, not realizing it. She narrowed her eyes, examining the entrance. If it hasn't rained, and there was no strong wind? Someone moved it. David parked the car in front of my house with a controlled movement. Before I could open the door, he put his arm out to stop me slightly. "Mr. Tom, let me get out first." I obeyed. David got out, looked both ways down the street, and then signaled for me to get out. She came up behind me, analyzing every detail like she was reading a crime scene. The wooden sign hanging on the porch, the one my wife had painted years ago, was banging against the wall with a repeated, dry, almost irritating sound. Clack, clack, clack. That simple sound turned my stomach. On the ground, right in front of the door, there were recent tire marks. I knew every stone, every crack in the pavement in front of my house, and those marks were not mine. "That's new," I said in a low voice, feeling a chill on the back of my neck. She bent down to look at them. "It didn't rain last night. The ground shouldn't have marked like this, unless someone was here very recently." I put the key in the lock. It turned with difficulty, like someone had forced it. When I pushed the door, a harsh creak echoed inside. It wasn't the normal sound. This noise seemed recent, aggressive, like the door had been thrown open just before we arrived. A shiver ran down my spine. When I walked in, I found Emily's sneakers thrown in the middle of the living room. She never left them like that. Never. There was also a glass rolled under the coffee table. I bent down and picked it up. It still had a dry water line, as if it had been spilled just hours ago. "Someone was here," she said, entering with careful steps. I went straight to the kitchen. Under the sink was a crumpled, damp paper towel. On the counter, the landline phone was crooked, as if someone had made a call in a hurry or in panic. My throat tightened. "Emily was here," I muttered. "She must have come looking for me. Or maybe she hadn't come alone." David appeared from the hallway, frowning. "Your bedroom door is ajar." I felt a sharp pain in my chest. I walked slowly into the room. Everything looked the same. The bed made, the curtains closed, the air heavy. But something was wrong. The small drawer next to the closet, the one I almost never touched, was open just a crack. That drawer held my most personal documents. She approached and opened it gently. Inside, papers were missing that I knew were always there. "Is this where you keep your financial documents?" she asked, not looking away. I nodded. "My wife's life insurance. My bank papers. Old contracts." My heartbeat suddenly sped up. My hands started to shake. "Tom," she said firmly, "this is not a coincidence. Someone was looking for something specific." A thought hit me like a stone. A week ago, Brian asked me if I still had my wife's old insurance policy. He said we needed it to organize some papers. She closed the drawer with a decisive movement. "He is preparing something against you. This isn't an impulsive reaction, it's a plan." At that moment, the kitchen landline started to ring. A sharp, insistent, almost violent ring. The three of us jumped. David moved first and answered it. "Hello?" There was a short silence. Then David looked at me. "It's Brian." I felt like the air disappeared from the room. I shook my head immediately. David hung up without saying a word. Barely a second later, my phone, the new, secure one, vibrated in my pocket. A message. "I know you're back. We need to talk." "Brian." She didn't hesitate. "David, turn off the phone. He can track the location." David took the device and shut it down quickly. I felt an enormous weight in my chest. It wasn't just fear. It was humiliation, contained rage, sadness for my own daughter, and a deep feeling of violation. My house, my refuge, my only safe space, was not safe anymore. I went to the back door. I opened it carefully. On the damp grass were fresh footprints. Clear, deep, a large boot print. She leaned down and visually measured the distance between them. Size 11. Brian wears an 11, right? I nodded slowly. I felt sick. David circled the yard and checked the latch on the gate. The back gate wasn't latched properly. Someone opened it. My heart was beating so hard I could barely breathe. This wasn't a robbery. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was surveillance. It was intimidation. It was control. She walked toward me with a decisive step. "Tom, you cannot stay here tonight." I looked at my house, the kitchen where I used to cook with my wife, The armchair where Emily fell asleep watching movies as a kid. The hallway where her high school photos still hung. But all I felt was emptiness. "Let's go back to the retreat," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You'll be safe there." I didn't argue. I didn't have the strength. Before leaving, I grabbed a few shirts, my back medication, and a picture frame. Me, my wife, and Emily when she was 8. My wife's smile shined in the glass, and seeing it filled my eyes with tears. David locked the door and double-checked the knob. All locked. No one is getting in. She looked at me with a kind of serious tenderness. "Tom, tomorrow, I want to talk to Emily." I swallowed. I didn't answer. She put her warm hand on my shoulder. "It's time for her to know the truth. The whole truth." We got in the car. As we drove away, the sunset light fell on my house like a gray, cold, sad layer. I kept watching it until it disappeared behind the trees. I knew that place was no longer what it had been for 20 years. I knew that, when I returned, something would have to change for good. But what I didn't know yet was how much all of our lives were about to change. That night the air was colder than usual. I could feel it even before I left the cabin. Maybe it wasn't just the weather. Maybe it was the feeling that something important was about to change. When I knocked on the door of cabin number 2, she opened it with a soft, almost warm smile. "Come in, Tom. Everything is ready." Her kitchen was lit with a dim yellow light that made everything seem calmer. The table was set with a simple elegance. A beige linen tablecloth, white plates lined up perfectly, thin glasses, and a small vase with a fresh sprig of rosemary. The aroma of cream of mushroom soup and fresh toast mixed with the natural smell of the wood. I stood for a moment, not knowing where to look first. It had been a long time since anyone had prepared a meal thinking of me. "Sit down," she said, pointing to the chair across from her. I had just settled in when someone knocked on the door with 3 sharp raps. David peeked his head in. "Miss Chambers, the gray SUV we saw earlier has moved away from Mr. Tom's neighborhood. For now, it seems there's no follow." She nodded firmly. "Thank you, David. Keep monitoring." When David left, she sat across from me. "Now, let's eat." She served the cream of mushroom soup. The flavor was so warm that, for an instant, I felt like I was sitting at my wife's table many years ago. I forced myself to come back to the present, though the nostalgia squeezed my chest. While we ate, she took her tablet and turned it on. "Before tomorrow gets started, you need to see a few things." She turned the screen to me. It was an email from Henderson and Associates. To Eleanor Chambers. The first paragraph spoke of debts, late interest, rejected payments, all in Brian Carter's name. My stomach turned. What does this mean?" I managed to ask. "It means Brian isn't just in financial trouble," she replied. "He has lied repeatedly to hide it." She scrolled to another part of the document. Failed attempt to gain financial control over his biological mother. History of family manipulation. I stared at her, disbelieving. "How did you get all this?" She set the tablet on the table. "Tom, when I feel someone poses a risk to an elder, I investigate. It's my responsibility." She paused. "Besides, I care about you. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't used to someone speaking up for me like that." She opened another file. These were documents about Emily and Brian's joint account. My heart stopped for a second. "Emily opened this account a year ago," she explained, "but Brian is the only one with electronic access. Only he can move money." I put my face in my hands. Emily always avoided talking about money. Now I understood. "That is pure financial control," Ellie added. "A pattern that usually escalates." I wanted to say something, to defend my daughter, to say she couldn't be that naive, but the words stuck in my throat. Ellie turned on a video. Brian appeared, getting out of his SUV, banging on the door of her company building, arguing with one of the guards. His expression was completely distorted with frustration. The way he spoke, the way he pointed his finger, he looked like another person, a darker, more impulsive, more dangerous version. It hurt to see that. I felt embarrassed for him, but also a pang of sadness for Emily. She had never seen that side of her husband. Or maybe she had, and just didn't know how to face it. Ellie turned off the screen. "Tom, you are not responsible for this." I took a deep breath. The only thing I could say was, I need to see my daughter. Ellie held my gaze with understanding. I know, and we will. She picked up her phone and dialed a number. Owen, can you come? I need your help with a security matter tomorrow. When she hung up, she explained, My son. He specializes in digital security and surveillance systems. He will make sure your meeting with Emily is safe. I nodded, though I still had a lump in my throat. It was hard to accept that my life needed surveillance, like I was a criminal or a fugitive, instead of a 1-year-old father who just wanted to live in peace. David knocked on the door again. There's a strange car circling the cabins. Out of county plates. I'm checking. Ellie frowned. Brian is getting desperate. My heart jumped. Not because I thought Brian would hurt me physically, but because of what he could do to Emily. How he could twist her thoughts. How he could make her feel guilty. How he could turn her into a shadow of herself. Ellie poured tea into 2 ceramic cups. Tom, tomorrow will be a crucial day. Crucial enough to be scared? I asked without thinking. She smiled, with a certain sadness. Not scared. Clear. I have to tell Emily the truth, I whispered. Yes, but not just that. She needs to hear it from you. Not from Brian, not from third parties. From you. I stared at the table, the cup, my trembling hands. I felt like every muscle in my body was fighting between guilt and the need to protect my daughter. Ellie got up and looked for something in a drawer. She came back with a thick white envelope. Take this. It's a copy of the video from the moment he left you on the highway. It's yours. You can show it to Emily if you think it's necessary. I held the envelope with both hands, as if it were fragile. It was strange to think such a small object could hold such a devastating moment of my life. This video, it feels like a conviction, I said in a dull voice. No, Ellie replied firmly. It's a key, the key to getting out from Brian's control. David called from the door. All clear. No one is lurking. Ellie walked me to cabin number 4. The path was silent, barely lit by the lanterns. The pines swayed gently, and the cold air hit my face, as if to remind me I was still in this world, that none of this was a bad dream. Get some rest, Ellie said, handing me the key. You'll need to be strong tomorrow. I nodded. I knew she was right. When I went inside, a gust of wind slipped through the window. The trees whispered, as if they knew my life was about to change. I left the envelope on the table. I stared at it for a long time, motionless, as if afraid to open it again, as if inside there wasn't a video, but an open wound. I reached out and touched it with my fingertips. Emily, I muttered to myself, tomorrow I will tell you everything, even if it hurts. I turned off the light. And there, in the silence of that lonely cabin, I knew I was entering the hardest part of my story, in the truth. I woke up before the phone rang. The night had been restless, full of thoughts and images that came back again and again. The video from the road, Emily's look in the cafeteria, Brian's voice screaming at me through the phone. When Ellie knocked on the door at 7 o'clock sharp, I was already sitting on the edge of the bed, feeling for the first time a mix of fear and determination at the same time. Tom, Ellie said from the hallway, it's time. I nodded, took a deep breath, and opened the door. Ellie was dressed in a light gray coat, her hair perfectly pulled back, and she held a thick folder. David appeared a few seconds later with his usual serious expression, checking something on his phone. I'm going to inspect the vehicle again, he announced. Good instincts, Ellie replied. We walked toward the car. The morning air was so cold my hands trembled as soon as I stepped outside. David opened the trunk and took out a small device with green lights, which he began to pass under the car. Just a precaution, he said. I've seen worse. Ellie turned to me. Don't worry. It's protocol. But I was worried. I worried about everything. About Emily. What she would say. What she would feel. If she could forgive a father who hadn't known how to protect her. When we finally set off, Ellie placed a black zippered bag on her lap. Inside were all the documents she had gathered. The video, the photos, the lawyer's emails. I glanced at them, feeling like we were carrying dynamite. The cafe is 15 minutes out, David said from the driver's seat. As we got closer to downtown Denver, my hands clenched tightly on my legs. The streets were quiet, just a few shops opening and a couple of cyclists speeding past. Still, I felt a pressure in my chest, like I was walking straight toward an abyss. Finally, David slowed down. We're close. I'll observe the area before you get out. I saw a tall young man in a black jacket standing at the cafe door. He wore earbuds connected to a small device. Owen? Ellie said as she opened the door. My breathing eased a little. He had a presence that conveyed control and calm, a stillness that resembled his mother's. Mr. Tom, he greeted me with a nod. No one will get near here without me noticing. I went into the cafe. The sound of the bell as the door opened made me flinch. There, at a table in the back, was my daughter, Emily. Her eyes were swollen, her gaze lost in her cup, and yet, when she saw me, she stood up so fast she almost knocked over the chair. Dad! She hugged me so tight it almost hurt. I hugged her back, shaking a little. The feeling of having her close again almost broke me, I thought. I thought something terrible happened to you, she cried. I'm here, honey, I muttered. I'm okay. I just needed to be safe. Ellie gave us a moment before she approached. Emily looked at her, confused, wiping her tears. And you are? I'm E.G. Chambers, she said softly. I just want to make sure you hear the whole truth today. Emily looked down at the white envelope in my hands. What is that? I sat across from her. My fingers took too long to open the envelope. Something you need to see. Emily pulled out the photos first. Her hand trembled when she saw the image of the SUV stopped on the highway. Then she looked at the USB drive. Can I? E.G.? Took out her small laptop, turned it on, and put in the USB. We were all silent. The video began. Brian stopping the car, Brian getting out, Brian opening my door, Brian pushing me out, Brian slamming the door, Brian driving away, leaving me there, in the middle of nowhere. Emily put her hands to her mouth. Her tears fell all at once, as if something inside her had shattered. No, this can't be, Dad. I don't want you to suffer, honey, I said, my voice more broken than ever, but that is the truth. Emily shook her head, not to deny it, but because she couldn't believe it. He said you got out because you were angry. Her voice cracked. He said you wanted to walk alone. I felt a deep pain, a pain from wounded pride, from humiliation, but also from my daughter's innocence, from how much that man had manipulated her. That's not true, I said calmly. I didn't choose any of that. E.G. placed another document in front of her. Emily, I want you to read this. They were excerpts of Brian's debts, bank movements, attempts to take financial control of his own mother. Emily gritted her teeth. He told me everything was taken care of, that we were just investing. He's lying, E.G. said bluntly. He has been lying for a long time. Emily's phone vibrated right then. Brian, again, answer it. On speaker, E.G. requested. Emily hesitated, but she obeyed. Where are you? Brian roared from the other side. I'm with my dad, Emily said, her voice trembling but firm. There was a heavy silence. Who's with you? Did that old man fill your head? Emily, don't believe him. I saw it, she answered. I saw the video. I know what you did. Brian stammered. That's manipulated. Someone wants to break us up, Emily interrupted him. Are your bank statements manipulated too? Your debts? The joint account? Brian immediately raised his voice. You don't know anything. If you leave, I swear I'll lock all the accounts. You won't have a cent. The entire cafe went silent. I felt how anger for the first time was winning out over fear inside me. Ellie made a discreet signal. Owen started recording. Emily gripped the phone. I'm ending this, Brian. Don't call me again. And she hung up. She slumped a little in the chair, not from weakness, but from emotional exhaustion. Dad, how could I not see it? How could I be so blind? I took her hand. You're not blind. You just trusted, and he didn't deserve it. Owen approached. Emily, I can take you to a safe place. You won't have to go back to that house. Emily nodded, not protesting. David came in at that instant. We have a problem. The gray SUV is at the end of the street. Ellie stood up. Out the back door. We won't give him a second's advantage. Owen took Emily's coat and shielded her discreetly as he guided her. David went out first, checking every corner. Before I left, Emily hugged me again. Dad, thank you for not giving up on me. I never would. She left, protected by Owen and David, like it was a mission. Ellie took my arm as we left through the back of the cafe. "Tom," she said in a low voice, "the worst is over." I looked toward the street, where the gray SUV was parked erratically, like the symbol of a man in free fall. "No," I replied. "The worst is collapsing right in front of our eyes." And for the first time since this all began, I felt the story was changing direction, not toward fear, but toward the truth. That afternoon, as the sun slowly set behind the buildings of downtown Denver, I felt that every step I took toward the conference room was heavier than the last. I knew what we were about to face wouldn't just change my life, but my daughter's. Ellie walked beside me, decisive, with that calm firmness that had held me up all these days. David was behind us, always attentive, always alert. Owen arrived separately, protecting Emily in another vehicle to avoid being followed. When she entered the room, I noticed her eyes were still swollen, but there was something new in her gaze: determination. The conference room was small, with an oval table and a large screen at the end. In the center was Ellie's lawyer, Mrs. Henderson, a woman with perfectly coiffed gray hair and the expression of someone who had seen too many injustices. "Thank you for coming on such short notice," Henderson said, adjusting her glasses. "I've reviewed all the material Ellie sent me. What we have here is not just irresponsibility. It's a pattern of financial manipulation and elder abandonment. It is serious, very serious." I sat next to Emily. She squeezed my fingers as if she was afraid of falling. I stroked her hand gently. Henderson turned on the screen. First, she played the audio recording of the phone call with Brian from that morning. Brian's voice echoed through the room. "If you leave the house, I'll lock all the accounts." "You won't have a cent." Emily closed her eyes, sinking her face between her shoulders. I felt a huge lump in my throat. Hearing that controlling, threatening tone again made me see everything with unbearable clarity. Henderson continued, "This type of statement is a direct threat and a psychological weapon." Next, she projected the video from the highway. Brian stops the car. He orders me out. He leaves me alone. He accelerates. The moment I was left standing on the shoulder, looking at the road like a lost old man, stuck a thorn in my chest all over again. I saw myself from the outside and felt shame and pain, but also a quiet anger, different from anything I had felt before. Emily broke down, crying silently. Ellie approached and placed a glass of water in front of her. "It's not your fault," she told her warmly. "You didn't see it because you had no reason to. You don't expect that from the person you love." Emily wiped her face. "Mom always said love shouldn't be scary. But I was scared, Ellie. Scared to argue with him. Scared to make him angry. Scared of disappointing him." "That is emotional control," Henderson replied. "And now we need to review the financials." She opened a thick binder of documents. "Brian Carter has accumulated $38,000 in debt in the last 2 years. Credit cards, personal loans, undeclared expenses." Emily stared at the screen as if she couldn't believe it. "He said it was an investment, that it was for our house, for our future." Henderson shook her head. "He spent most of it on online gaming, electronics purchases, nights at the bar, and worst of all, he opened a joint account where you have no control." Emily put her hands to her mouth. "He said it was for convenience, that I didn't need to handle anything." I felt a blow to my chest hearing that. I stood up, positioned myself in front of my daughter, and spoke slowly, trying not to break. "Emily, since you got married, I've watched you change. You stopped laughing like you used to. You called me less. You apologized for everything, even little things. But I didn't want to pressure you. I didn't want to be a burden. I just wanted you to be happy, honey. But now I know. You were trapped, just like me." Emily cried harder and hugged me. "Dad, forgive me. I didn't know. I didn't know anything." "You don't have to ask for forgiveness. You were a victim too." Henderson resumed the conversation firmly. "My immediate recommendation is to separate the accounts, change all bank access, and send a legal restraining notice to Brian so he cannot approach Mr. Tom." Emily took a deep breath. "I'm ready." Owen opened a laptop in the center of the table. "With your permission, I can change the passwords right now and block Brian's remote access." Emily nodded. Owen began typing quickly, with meticulous gestures. Every click seemed to cut a thread tying my daughter to her husband. Ellie spoke firmly. "We will also notify Brian's workplace. Abandoning an elder in this manner is a crime, and they should know the kind of person they are employing. Emily lifted her head, wiping her tears. I want to end this marriage. She said it without trembling. I squeezed her hand. Honey, Dad is with you, every step. David entered again. Brian hasn't shown up, but he's sent 9 messages in the last 15 minutes. I recommend you turn off your phone. Emily turned off her phone immediately. Ellie approached her and gently took her shoulder. You don't have to thank me for anything. We are doing this because it's the right thing to do. The meeting lasted over 2 hours. But when we left, I felt my breathing was different. Fuller, less heavy, as if the air suddenly had more oxygen. Emily walked beside me. She wasn't shaking anymore. There was pain in her face, yes, but there was also strength, a strength I hadn't seen in her for years. When we got down to the lobby, Emily stopped. Dad? Yes, honey? I want to go with you tonight. I don't want to be alone. My heart stirred. Of course, honey. Come back with me. Ellie intervened. My driver will take you, and David will check the house before you go in. We won't risk anything. I accepted without hesitation. In the car, as we drove toward my neighborhood, Emily rested her head on my shoulder, like when she was 6 years old, and would fall asleep while I drove. I looked out the window. The sky was stained orange and purple. Denver looked like a new city, quiet, honest. Maybe I was the one who had changed. And as I stroked my daughter's hair, I understood something. For the first time in many years, my family was starting to break free.